fear as a compass. I'm going to try to say this as best as I can, but I truly believe that fear itself, that feeling, that doesn't mean you actually have to be afraid of something. But if anything, I truly believe that feeling of fear is the greatest North Star, the greatest compass your soul has in your entire being. Because typically speaking, and again, I don't want to use these negative words like afraid and stuff like that, but just for lack of better words, right? Whenever you're afraid of something, of doing something that's important to you, that's how you know it's important. Okay. You're not afraid of doing things that aren't important. Okay. But it's that fear, for lack of better words, of not accomplishing it or rejection or failure. Okay. That is most hindering thing. But the thing is, you got to swing to hit the ball. The next time you see that beautiful woman, that beautiful girl you've always wanted to talk to, the reason why you're afraid to talk to her is because you know it's important. Okay. But I'm a big believer that every answer is a yes, meaning if there's a beautiful girl and you want to talk to her, okay, by you saying nothing, your answer is no. If she rejects you, the answer is still no. So realistically, if you go and talk to that pretty girl, right, the only positive outcome for you attempting to do anything can only be a yes, because a no is of equal value when you do not try to do something compared to when you do it and you fail. If you knew that everything that you would do would only be a positive result, wouldn't you do more? Wouldn't you try to do more things? Think about that concept. What if everything that you wanted to try to do, you knew that you knew that you would actually make that shot in basketball, or get that hole in one, or get that beautiful girl you've always wanted to? You ever see some guys with girls that are way out of their league or something like that? Okay. That's because they weren't afraid. Or if they were, they used fear as a compass, because they swung, they hit, and now they got the girl, right? This applies for everything in life, okay? You need to be able to take chances. You need to be able to take risks. But what if they weren't chances? What if they weren't risks? The second that you start shifting your mindset from it will happen to it might happen, open doors are the only thing you're going to see in your life. You know how you've heard that phrase, if you think like a hammer, everything you look like is a nail, right? Well, think about it like this. I don't really exactly know what the perfect phrasing of it would be. I might come up with that at a later date. My point is, if you think that everything that you would try, you'd always succeed at, wouldn't you be more likely to try new things, to try a different sport, to try different food, to try to learn flying a helicopter, or to do all sorts of stuff? When you're in these new elements, I actually said something earlier to somebody twice in this last week, actually, essentially, which is that there's no such thing as difficult. The word difficult is actually just a catchword, okay, for somebody to have a sense of security during the earliest phases of learning. Meaning, if you say, learn how to ride a bicycle, you could say that's difficult. Okay. Well, it's not. It's because you don't have any experience doing it. Okay. If I say swimming a mile is difficult, it's not. You don't have any experience in it. But if you could swim 10 miles and flash forward to when you were trying to just swim one, that first mile didn't become any more or less of a distance. The difficulty, okay, was the barrier that you put in your mind before you got into the water. But what if you lived in a world, right, with no barriers? How much more could you get accomplished? How much further could you push yourself, right? That's part of the reason that I love this one book. That doesn't talk about this specifically, but it does essentially talk about shooting through your goals, right? Which is by Grant Cardone. It's called the 10X rule. And it essentially talks about like multiplying your goals by 10 to get through that goal. If you try to get something 10 times bigger than what your goal is, you're going to get your goal and then past that and beyond, right? Another one of my favorite authors served as a Navy SEAL, David Goggins. Both of his books, very phenomenal. He really just, in the physical aspect, you can see how he essentially takes that principle of multiplying your mind to have your body do the output that your mind wants. Instead of running 10 miles, think about running 100, and you'll do 10 pretty easily. It's not a mental trick, okay? It's a reality trick, okay? You're bending your mind, all right, just like steel, like a spoon or something like that, right? If you ever try to bend a spoon, to bend it, it might not be easy, but the more that you work at it, the middle of it becomes hot. That steel, okay, that aluminum or whatever it is, okay, it starts to become more pliable, right? And then after a while, you can contort it in any way that you want. Be the spoon, okay? And have your mind, have that be the heat. Start looking at everything as not just open doors of possibilities, okay? But closed doors after you walk through it with the result that you want. The second that you start putting your mind, okay, and not just visualizing it, but writing stuff down, as I mentioned, like in my last podcast, right? That will be the moment that you have not just that mental shift, but you'll have the physical shift. You'll go from thinking different to getting different results. And how are you going to determine that? Through fear. Whenever next time you have something, anything, doesn't matter what it is, fill in the blank, that you think this is a moment where something in your head says that you should be afraid of it, don't think of that as fear. Replace the word fear with important. Next time you get that feeling, okay, instead of saying that you should be afraid of this or you should fear doing that or the negative outcome, just remember you're only having that thought because you don't want to lose. All right? You don't want to get that rejection. And you only get that feeling of rejection, not wanting to lose for things that you care about, for things that are important. Okay? So I'm going to hop off. I hope everybody has a beautiful day. But if you remember everything, just remember, use fear as your compass. When you see something that's an opportunity, walk through that door. But before you walk through, know that on the other side of that door can only be a yes. Because before you walk through that door, it's a no. If you walk through it and it doesn't work, hypothetically, nothing ever changed. So there's no reason not to try. Let everything in your life be a yes. Don't just walk through doors. Don't just go through opportunities. Make opportunities. Create opportunities. Okay? For me in comedy, for example, if I'm reactive and I just wait for people to call me, it's going to be a slow day, right? But if I start calling up businesses and saying, offering and soliciting my services to create moments and memories with their staff or their comedy club or whatever, okay, I'm being proactive. You can be reactive, but you need to be proactive. You need to find opportunities to win. Always constantly creating new opportunities. And anytime you see something that is, again, quote unquote, fearful, or you're afraid to do something, just remember, replace that word fear or afraid with important. When you have that feeling, that just means that it's important. And if it's important, you owe it to yourself to do it. So walk through that door, accomplish that goal, and start pursuing all of these things that the rest of your life force, that other part, is trying to push you away from. Find the fear, replace it with importance. I'm Benja Well Done. Check me out. Peace.